For the final part, let's look at cmdletbinding and validating your parameters. So what is cmdletbinding? Well, cmdletbinding looks like parameter decoration, but actually it's valid for your whole function. Let's take our calculate circle function that we made earlier. If you don't have it, you can refer to the documentation or to the book with all the code provided. So let's take that function and let's add something new. At the top, just before the parameter statement, let's add the cmdletbinding between square brackets. Now, once we've done that, we can do something cool inside the function. First of all, we can do write verbose. And what is write verbose? Write verbose allows you to output information that will be optionally displayed if the user passes the verbose parameter. So it's not by default shown, but if the user wants some more information, he can add the verbose parameter. So let's write verbose, and then the calculation is, and then say mypi multiplied by radius, and then multiplied again by radius. Also, what we will do now is we'll add an error. So we'll add 3 divided by 0. So 3 divided by 0 for sure is going to yield an error because you can never divide by 3. And you'll quickly see why I added that error in the code. Now let's execute the code and let's execute calculate circle without anything. So what happens now is we get an error as expected because 3 cannot be divided by 0. PowerShell is telling us that. Now, because we added cmdletbinding, we also are adding an optional parameter called error action. And what you can do is you can take calculate circle, add -error action, and then silently continue. And what you basically are telling to PowerShell is that even if an error occurs, you want to continue the function and you don't want to see any output. And you will notice that in the future, if we're running different kind of cmdlets, a lot of them have this cmdletbinding defined, and you can say, okay, I don't want to see any errors. Okay, now our function runs fine. Let's rerun our function now, but with the verbose parameter. Now let's see what happens. Okay, great. Now we actually see how the calculation is made. Now for the next part, I'm going to copy paste in some code so that we don't have to define everything. You can find the code also in the booklet or in the documentation. So the first thing what I will paste in is the send fake email. And the send fake email has something interesting, and that's the validate pattern at the top. So what we are basically telling PowerShell is that we want to validate the string and we want to see if it matches a regex pattern. If you don't understand this regex pattern, don't worry, neither did I just copied it online from the regex website for email validation. So here we can actually validate then if the user is actually supplying a real email. So let's run our function with just Alice S2, and it should error out because basically Alice is not matching an email address. Let's try again with the Gmail and see if it works. Great. So now we can make sure that the user really supplies us with a real email address. We can do something else as well. So validate patterns is great for strings, but what if you want to validate numbers? For that, you can use the validate range. So in that case, you can actually tell PowerShell that you want to get an integer number, but for sure you want that value to be between 2 distinct values, so that the user cannot say, I want to reach the climate's goals in 2013, because that's already passed, or also not later than 2050. Okay, let's run the function and let's try some values. We can see that 1999 is not going to work. 2060 is also not working, but 2030 does work. Then finally, you sometimes want your user to supply a string that only matches 1 out of a couple of choices. To do that, you can use the validate set. So I have here a status for an alarm. I'm saying it can be either critical, normal, or boring. Okay, let's run our function. If we put it on foobar, it's saying, I don't know, this status is not good. Let's try critical. Now it's working. By the way, when you do this, you can actually tap between your validated set because PowerShell knows what are the only possibilities. Great. I hope you learned a lot more about functions in PowerShell.